Are you planning to run an Accord or a Honda Civic in a demolition derby, whether it be a 2003 Accord or a 90s Accord? Do you want to know some tips, tricks, and secrets I've learned to keep these cars on the track as long as you can? The first trick is the fuse panel. These Accords are not super picky when it comes to fuses. Basically, you can get rid of every fuse you need. This is the only fuse I needed to keep, which was for my EFI. But here's the big secret. Where you see these heavy fuses like this, replace them with wire. Some of these are good up to 100 amps, but in a collision, Hondas blow those fuses like you wouldn't believe. So here you can see one way that I've bypassed it, where I've took a cable, actually crimped on the ends of a solder, like a quick connects there, and connected it to bypass the fuse. So when I get hit, the fuse doesn't break, because if that fuse blows, you're instantly dead. Now let's go take a look at it on a 2000s Honda Accord. So here's a 2003 Accord. Now if you take a look, again, I was able to pull out almost every fuse. Now I did a little bit different design here with the larger fuses. I left them in and I just screwed a solid piece of copper basically from end to end so that if something happened, it still could go around and pop the fuse if it got to be a heavy hit. So this is the number one thing I do to Honda Civics, is this fuse bypass. Because as soon as those fuses go, you're dead. And you know, there's no sense to be dead in the ring when you don't have to be. So this 30-second little thing to change out these fuses, and all this is a piece of wire that screws down to both sides and then just basically bypasses the fuse itself. Now let's go on to the next thing. The next thing about these Hondas is the distributor caps. I know it doesn't seem like a big thing, but they're very cheap plastic and they come off like you wouldn't believe. They're just held on by these little screws at the bottom, at the top, and they do break and the distributor cap does come loose. As soon as that happens, again, you're dead in the water. No spark getting to the cylinders, your car's not going to run. So just some large zip ties. These ones here I purchased at Princess Auto. I don't think they were super expensive. I actually think they were kind of cheap. And I just zip tied the cap onto the motor. Again, a 30-second little thing can keep you going inside the ring. Now let's go take a look at the 90s Accord to see how that one looks compared to this one, because it is a little bit different. Notice how this one, the coil is actually in the distributor, so you don't have to worry about that. So here on this 94 Accord, you can already see that the distributor cap has been changed. Now you see this wire goes to the coil because the coil's not built into the distributor cap. It goes to this coil unit back here, and realistically, I don't like these. These get hot and they stop the car from running. The spark gets weaker and weaker. All I do is I disconnect this, and I take this power source and I run it to a coil that I install inside the car. For everyday driving, these are pretty good, but I find when the motor gets hot, these get hot, and as soon as these coils get hot, you no longer run. This one has not been in a derby, so it has not been changed, but this is what it looks like factory. As you can see, all the cables come into the cap and all that, but this, by the way, that's how many fuses are supposed to be in these cars, and I just tear it down to this 115 amp right there. So they're easy to tear down. Like, that's how much you can take out of this car. It's crazy. Now let's go take a look at one of these that have been in a derby and show you what I do to it. So here we are back at the car that was in the demolition derby. And as you can see, the zip tie is holding the cover on, because this one here is already actually broken, as you can see. So the zip ties hold the cover on, and then I have this extra coil cable zip tied in so it won't come out. And as you see, it runs all the way into the cab of the vehicle. So the wire comes up into the interior to this MSD coil. Now this is not the most prettiest to set up with all my zip tie monstrosity, but I have the two positive and negatives running right to the coil. I have the coil cable. I just drill a hole, mount it in the dash, and that's where it sits for the entire demolition derby. That there will not get hot from the motor. That produces much better spark than factory for this motor, and she just goes. She goes and goes and goes. So the last thing that I really have to talk about on these Accords is the suspension design. Now the backs are a little bit different from 90s to 2000s, but realistically you guys are not going to be concerned as much about the back as you are the front. So let me take the car in the shop apart to show you what I mean. So here is the main difference from an Accord and a Civic to basically any GM, any Toyota, basically anything like that. Cavaliers are all the same as well, but this here, the strut is actually different from the spindle. So these spindles have a nasty arc as they come up to an upper ball joint, and same as a lower ball joint, and then this unit here actually comes all the way down and then bolts to the lower control arm. So everything on this car is actually pretty strong, pretty stout, except for the spindle right here. These have a tendency of cracking right about there. And the upper ball joint's got a tendency to break as well. Now, it's got an advantage that if you bend the strut or the spindle and it doesn't snap, your car's not going to drop because obviously your strut's separate, so it will not affect how your ride height is. But it does have the problem where it shears this off. So let me show you what happens when that shears. What we have here is the actual spindle that was in that car, and as you can tell, it is broken and sheared right off. And this used to go right on the top of there. So you see how wick of a bend that takes? I took one axle shot in the front and snap! Now I was able to keep moving, but as soon as that happened, I knew I was pretty much dead. So you've really got to be careful about this. It is a strong point on these because they have a good subframe and there's no strut to be bent, but the spindles do snap. So make sure that you guys are prepared for that. The very last thing about a Honda Accord and some of the newer Hondas is the gas tanks are very, very hard to get out of these cars. Make sure you guys know your rules before you buy one of these 2000 Accords. As you can tell, I still have factory gas tank underneath there, but I've cut the whole bottom out of it because there is honestly no way to remove that tank other than dropping the whole rear subframe. And I'm not going to drop that subframe. What you're seeing right there is actually inside the gas tank. You can kind of see the cut over there all the way around. Just cut it out with a Sawzall. So make sure that you're allowed to keep the tank in the factory location because you can't take that out. But other than that, the wiring is really easy on these Hondas. Everything else is a good running, solid running, easy to build, solid cars in the front because of the subframe, and the frames are actually very, very strong in the front. But that's my tips and tricks for a Honda Accord, Civic kind of thing. Let me know if I missed anything, guys. Thanks for watching. See you guys tomorrow. Don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and anything that you find that you do differently on your Hondas.